Hi, I'm Cheryl Fergus-Ferrell. Given that July is Pride Month and the increased media coverage of transgender issues, I had the privilege to interview my good friend CJ, who is a transgender woman. As there currently is so much misleading information and strong opinions about trans people, I wanted to dig a bit deeper and learn from someone's first-hand experience. I recently read a report by Stonewall and YouGov that was published at the beginning of this year. In 2017, 41% of trans people experienced a hate crime or incident. More than 28% of trans people in a relationship faced domestic abuse from a partner. 25% have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. 12% have been physically attacked by colleagues or customers. And 41% of trans people said that healthcare staff lack the necessary understanding of specific trans health needs when accessing general healthcare services. Now, just to warn you that there will be some strong language and discussions of adult themes in this interview. The first question that I asked CJ was, how does she define herself?
I'm 34, and after a lot of life experience, I would define myself as a tough, beautiful princess who has fucking fought very hard, despite good appearances and nice speaking. I've had a very hard life, so I would define myself as a tough warrior princess who is ultimately kind and respectful.
Wow, that's amazing. Where you say you've had a hard life, can we just touch on that a little bit?
Of course.
So we've known each other for just over a year, maybe coming up to about 18 months now. Yeah, we met through a mutual friend. And we actually kind of met online, really, because we used to like each other's posts on Facebook and again through our mutual friend.
Every time I would see you post on our mutual friend's page, that I would always like the things that you did. So.
And then the situation came up where we actually ended up sharing a room together because we were both travelling from London up north, and that was the first time we actually met in person. And I remember us having a conversation over Messenger, and you were saying that it was you were a bit apprehensive about the event that you were going to be going, that we were going to be attending, because you hadn't seen some of these people in, was it about 20 years?
Yeah.
And I remember you saying to me in one of the messages, I don't know how they're going to respond to me because the last time they saw me, I was a boy. And I remember reading that thinking, when you're just messaging and stuff and you're like, yeah. And then I got that one and I looked at it and I was like, what? And I kind of put the phone down and I thought, I'm probably tired. I mean, I'm an insomniac anyway, so. And I kind of went to go and make a cup of tea, came back again.
It was a typo all along.
She must have got that wrong, what the heck? And I looked at it again and I thought, no, she definitely said they knew me when I used to be a boy. And that was the moment for me when I realised that you were obviously a transgender woman. And it didn't make a blind bit of difference to me. I knew who you were, I felt I knew who you were before we'd actually physically met. So, it was neither here nor there to me. My question to you is, what was the experience for you growing up? Did you always feel as though you were born into the wrong body? Did it happen later on in your life? Did you know from quite early on? And what was it like for you going through that transition period?
Mm-hmm. Well, very good question. Just briefly to answer with a statement you made in the lead up to it, that I didn't even see it like that. And I kind of have just always felt like me, very much. So when you say transgender women, that is officially, in layman's terms, what I am. However, I I have never seen or felt in myself that I'm transgender, that I'm a label. I have only ever, from the time when I woke up, when I was 3 years old, in a strange bed, I remember it very clearly. I was not in my own bed, we'd stayed somewhere, friends of the family, and I remember looking up out of a skylight, but I've never seen a skylight before, and I woke up and I just remember thinking that I was a girl and that I was in the wrong body. And so...
At 3 years old?
At 3 years old, yes. And it's my first memory.
Wow.
It's my first memory, is waking up and knowing that I was a girl, but knowing that I was me, sorry. They see, this is the thing, I didn't know that I was a girl, I knew that I was female.
Yeah.
I just knew who I was. But I remember thinking about that memory. I do remember knowing that the actuality wasn't the same as...
Yeah, that must have been confusing for you, particularly at that young age. You know to yourself you are a female,
yeah.
But you look in the mirror, the way people perceive you when they look at you is completely different from how you feel to yourself. How on earth do you deal with that?
Well, I've always been quietly fierce in my resolute knowledge that I'm the female that I am, and that I was going to live my life who I was. Every time I tried to fit in with the convention of my gender,
yeah,
I could actually I can remember thinking in my head, thinking about a future wedding and thinking, but I want to wear the dress.
You want to be the bride,
thinking about future kids and thinking, but I don't want to be a dad, I want to be a mum.
Yeah.
And I would say massively, going back to the very first question, you know you're a female when you have that instinct to be a mother from birth. You either know if you're a father or a mother, and I was always a mother.
You always saw yourself as the mother. It's funny you say that because I remember us having a conversation actually when we were travelling back down to London at that same trip, and we were talking about motherhood, and I don't have any kids yet, and I remember you saying to me at the time as well, you know, I'd love to be a mum more than anything, and for the record I think you'd be a fantastic mum. I do hope that works out for you. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, that must have been so difficult when you've got people I mean, when was the first time you mentioned any of this to your family?
So I actually served back in those days. I remember physically having rows with my parents, with my dad and my uncle one night. They were putting me to bed and I was arguing with them that I was a princess, and they were like, you can't be because you're a boy. And I literally remember not being able to go to sleep because I was so angry that they were physically telling me that I wasn't who I was, and yet when I was alone with my daddy, he always let me be the princess. So I found
massive conflict there.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was the situation like at home then, apart from obviously you're saying initially with the arguments and stuff? Did it get better as time moved on? Or?
So basically from those days I used to get into physical fights, toddler fights with other children.
Or at play school and things like that?
Things like that, play dates, etc. Didn't call it that back in the 80s, but yeah. And I kind of disowned from playing with the other kids because they would tell me that I was a boy, and I would get physically aggressive because I didn't understand why they were telling me I couldn't be a princess. I was only 3 years old. And so by the time I got to school, I'd been kind of drummed into me by my family how I wasn't really allowed to say
That you had to almost behave in a certain way. Okay,
however,
you're going to school now, this is the way that you need to portray yourself.
Up until that point, they had let me wear a wig at home. They had let me, my grandmother had made me a tutu, a purple tutu with silver sparkly sequins. Yeah, so home it was
acceptable in the home, but to the outside world you had to present.
And just to be very clear, I am an abuse victim, so I would say that followed in the culture of what goes on at home isn't acceptable for showing in front of other people.
You're showing a different phase and a different...
What happens at home stays at home.
Yeah, very much so. Was the abuse from family, people you knew, or...?
Yes, it was from my father and my non-paternal family relative.
So all of that you're dealing with, that's obviously going to have an effect on your mental health, as well as struggling with who you know you are and not being able to effectively be who you are to the public eye.
Well, the situation that you present in itself was so difficult, and then my father and mother split up, and I got a stepdad who was psychologically and physically abusive. So it went from one...
It's almost like frying pan to the fire then, really.
Well, it's funny because I now look back at myself pre-6 in those early years when my daddy was at home, and I think I was so happy. Like, I wasn't, but...
Are you saying that maybe in comparison to how it was then when you had a stepfather? So it wasn't great with being at home with your dad, but it was even worse then when somebody else came into the fold?
I'll go on record as saying that the psychological and physical abuse that my stepfather tormented me with was worse than the sexual abuse that my father did with me. And Daddy actually was only ever loving in the way he did. And my stepdad was physically violent and abusive. Like, he was not nice to me. So.
Did that have a massive impact on your relationship? So say when you got to your teen years in secondary school, and how was that for you? What was it like in terms of people you fancied, boys you fancied and stuff? Did people perceive you to be gay?
Yes.
Because I can imagine that must be the first thing that people would think, well, you look like, you're a boy and you fancy another guy, so therefore you're...
Here's the thing. From 8 to 9, 8 to 11, I could have passed for a short-haired girl. And I was intrinsically effeminate and not necessarily kind and sweet and gentle. I was those things.
Yeah.
But I did pass for a girl. My parents, often stepfather and mother, used to always get comments, "Oh, your daughter's lovely." And
really?
We don't know.
And what was their reaction?
Yeah, they were like,
we don't have her.
That's our son. That's our son. And then I'd be like, well, A, no, and B, actually, he's not even my dad. So.
Yeah, in your opinion.
He's just married to my mother. Like, it's not my thing.
Not your issue.
But it was forced to be.
Yeah.
So to answer your question properly, I went to high school. When I met our mutual friend, it was when I was 9, and I went to a third primary school, and the third out of 3.
Primary school.
The first one I left because it was a private school and my daddy left and we couldn't afford the fees.
Okay, to keep up with that.
The second one was a mismatch for 2 years, and then the third one was supposed to see me through my final years and try and help me into high school. And that's when I met our mutual friend. And in that age, in the mid-90s, I suddenly kind of was accepted for a while. I think people accepted that I just was a girl that was a boy.
Yeah.
But then I went to high school in the mid-90s in the north.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, what your perceptions might be is worse. It's worse. I still have nightmares every single night. I still travel through the corridors. I know the exact layout. I could draw you a blueprint of that school.
Was there a lot of physical, was it physical and verbal abuse from the kids?
Yeah, and mental. Yeah. People, do you know, I don't know if you remember, there's always one kid in every high school. It doesn't matter if you're in the first year of high school or in the last year of high school. You know who that kid is.
Yeah.
Everyone bullies them.
Yeah.
Well, I was that one. So, 3 days into my final year, age 15 going on 16, because I was early in the year, 3 days into the new term, the year 7s were kicking me in the corridor.
3 days?
Yeah, it only took 3 days. And then, as a skinny, perceived gay boy, in the north, in the 90s, I wasn't physically aggressive anymore. I wasn't. Yeah. It had been knocked out of me. Yeah.
That kind of almost, that tough bravado that maybe you had sort of built up as a shield maybe when you were a little bit younger.
But actually, no, I have to bar you on one point there.
Yeah.
It's just because I don't believe that the 3-year-old was the bravado. I believe the 3-year-old was genuine because kids don't lie.
No, that's a very fair point. That's what they always say.
And it got knocked out of me for a while, but that's why I answered your first question with brave and tough. Because I have to be, because that is part of me. It's not who I wanted to be. I wanted to be the endlessly girly princessy princess.
When these kids in high school were calling you gay and beating you up and stuff like that, what did you say back to them? Did you say, I'm not gay?
For 3 years, I said, no. And then one day, Queer as Folk had just come up on the TV.
Oh, yes.
And it was brilliant. And I wasn't allowed to watch it, but by that point I had a TV and a video recorder in my room. So I used to secretly set the timer. And when I couldn't, because it played up, I'd set it downstairs. I set it at my dad's once. And in the morning,
I bet that went down well.
The tape had gone. The tape had gone.
Oh, so he'd obviously taken it out, maybe realised what you'd taken.
We never discussed it. We never discussed it, but that tape, I never saw it again. It had like 3 episodes on. But
how did that feel then for you when Queer as Folk came on and you were able to see?
So everyone had been saying it for 3 years. You're gay, you're gay, you're gay, you're gay. I'd had it every day, and I was just really sick of hearing it. And then I saw this programme, and these people were so happy to be themselves, even though they did face adversity in the programme, and I'm glad they showed that. Yeah. They were just unashamedly
just proud of who they are.
Proud of themselves as human beings.
In spite of, whatever might fall their way.
Not even I think that was the thing. I think there was no in spite of. I think it was just we are. There's no spite. Obviously, when I was a teenage gay boy, as stipulated by those around me, I would go into the female toilets when I was out with my friends, because I didn't feel comfortable going into the men's toilet. I really didn't. And I would. Did
you feel scared or
yes,
just?
Yes, I did. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I would just. And this interview is not asking questions, but if I could ask one question,
absolutely,
anyone,
because it's good for people to understand.
Feel walking into a man's toilet right now?
Very apprehensive.
Go to the toilet, but you can only use the man's.
Yeah,
that's you just walked into a place. That's your rule,
and that's the only toilet that's available to me. And I know that there's going to be people in there. It's not to say there's no one in the building.
No, they're
going
to stare at you. They're going to
make comments.
I literally in the toilets, the male toilets, once when I dared to go in there. I was like 19. I don't even know how I dared to go in. I think I was actually looking for boys.
Nice pick-up place.
I was coming out, and 2 fucking really hard guys went, you be really fit when you're a woman. And I literally just went, thanks.
Really? Wow.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you know the club.
I can imagine. I can well imagine. That is an interesting
I
story.
literally just went, thank you.
So was that kind of like your epiphany moment then? Was that when you kind of thought, do you know what? I'm going to actually take steps towards being who I need to be.
Yeah, basically it was this toilet issue. It was dreams of toilets. It was going to uni and always using the female toilets. It was an issue of, I know who I am, and I need to make the physical change because I'm already using the bathrooms. I'm already using.
Were you wearing female clothes at that time, or?
Well, in the early 2000s, it was fairly androgynous. In that a lot of people just wore jeans and a brightly coloured t-shirt, and in those, like, this is when pink just had come out for guys.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like a silly thing to say now, but it had just come out for guys.
No, I remember.
And so it was cool. People could just,
yeah,
you know,
you could just be. You didn't
that.
have to make. It wasn't like a big.
Back in those days, Kanye, when he started, he was androgynous. He used to wear leather skirts and stuff. Like we were still in the leftover days of Bowie, and it was cool, and it was all right.
It's a nicer time in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So after you went through the physical transition, how did you find that in terms of relationships? So when you were either looking for relationships or people approaching you, did you feel as though you needed to disclose to them about who you are?
In the very early days, I would have to, because I would often get picked up as a female, even though I was living as an androgynous male. I'm reluctant to say that because I don't feel like I ever thought of myself as male, but technically,
yeah, I understand what you mean.
So I did used to get picked up a lot, and I did have to say to them in those days. But I know the question you're asking, so I'll give you a honest answer.
Yeah, give me the honest answer, because
okay.
This is something that, just to put some context here, it's something that most people, if you ask them, feel quite strongly about one way or another.
I'd say that's one of the pinnacles of the debate.
It's one of the pinnacles that we spoke about the bathroom issue, but this, I think, even more so. So there was
a woman was murdered over it.
Yes, I'm just going to mention
more than one woman.
Exactly.
Murdered over it.
People have been murdered. Now, I had seen a story in the news. I think it was in the United States about a transgender woman.
That story you're referring to.
Who was
with the Navy
unfortunately killed by this Navy guy that she got together with. She felt comfortable enough to share with him afterwards, after they'd become intimate, that she is a transgender female.
And that he had consented on that first night to not treat her like a lady in the old school sense. He had consented to take her home and have sex with her.
Yeah, after a few hours or what the case may be. So his argument to the court, no doubt, I didn't read the full statements, but it would have been along the lines of he felt that he had been in some way deceived by her. Mm-hmm. So not that that was an excuse for him to fly into a rage and murder the poor woman, but that was his reasoning behind why he had lost it.
Uh-huh.
So I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you felt that you needed to disclose to people? Have you felt in situations where you felt you didn't need to do it? And generally, what is your thoughts on full disclosure?
Okay. So, pre-operation, obviously I had to disclose.
Yeah.
And I found that 99% of the men were more than willing to participate, and the other 1%, some could be persuaded, some graciously backed off, and a couple were violent, but you know, I was a fast runner and skinny back in those days. And I would definitely say, since No, I do not tell every single guy, and I have a reason why I don't tell every single guy.
Why?
Why? Because they don't tell me everything. They don't tell me if they've got a sexual disease. They don't tell me if their family has a hereditary mental disease. They don't tell me if they've got AIDS. They don't tell me if they've got children. They don't tell me if they've got a girlfriend. They don't tell me their real name. They don't tell me their real name sometimes. And at the end of the day, the issue of sexual consent as an abuse victim is very dear to me.
Yeah.
And I know that it ties in with the question that you're asking. So, do I agree with non-consensual sex? No. Of course I don't. As an abuse victim, there's nothing worse.
Yeah, absolutely not.
For me, it's the
I think
line.
any right-thinking person, whatever spectrum you fall in, non-consensual sex
For me,
is a
forcing
no-no.
someone is the line.
Yeah.
Telling anybody they have to do something that they don't want to do is the line. So, the guys want to. When I meet a man and I'm actually just being myself with him, he doesn't tell me if he's got children or if he's got chlamydia or even if he's got AIDS. And he sleeps with me anyway because to him I'm sorry to be crass, but to him I'm just a vagina. I'm just a vagina with long legs and pretty eyes. And
that's what they're looking for.
And that's all they
moment,
want.
yeah.
They don't want a backstory. They don't want the ins and outs. They don't want to know my family history. They don't want to know my life. They don't want to know my ethics. And they don't tell me theirs. So if they don't tell me their deepest, darkest secret, why the hell
do you
would
feel
I?
that you need to tell them? That's a very valid point.
I will discuss my genuine situation with anybody genuinely asking genuine questions. If you're just a horny dude chatting me up and I'm horny and you think I'm pretty, you wanted a vagina, well I have a vagina now, so you've got what you wanted, there is no issue.
There's no need for any further discussion.
No.
So if, for example, now it had gone further and it had actually developed into a full-fledged relationship, do you think that you would ever say something to them in that circumstance?
Okay.
Or is it necessary?
I'll
As
answer
you
that
are-
question really personally. I can't speak for everyone who happens to have been born in the wrong body or feels that they're part of the trans community or the LGBTQ community. I'm only saying for myself. But if I really liked him, I would have just told him the first night. I would have blurted it out.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have just, but when I meet someone that I'm really just with,
you
I've
really
just
got
blurted it
that
out and I'm like, do you know what? I'm loving our time together so much that I'm just going to tell you, and if that's the end of our time, then our time was great.
Yeah.
Like,
and you've made the most of it and
But no, if you're just a hot random, well, guess what? You just see me as a hot random, so I'm not going to extend anybody same courtesy that they don't extend me. And I think that's true of all human beings. I think you extend the courtesy that you're given.
That's true. You get what you give. No, that's a really, really valid point. If you could give any advice to anyone out there who is feeling conflicted, wants to be who they are, but they're maybe afraid to talk to family members or friends or their inner circle, or they're worried about going through that transition period and all the things that follow with it, because it's not an easy process. I mean, I'm making a huge assumption here as someone who hasn't gone through it, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's no picnic. So,
no corrections.
You know, it's not easy. If you could give any advice to anyone out there in that similar situation to yourself, what would you say to them?
I would say, if you know, then you know. If you watch this and you think in your heart, yeah, I that's exactly how I felt, or in part how I felt, then I would just want to say to those people, as a human being, as a person who's alive on this planet today, I have no other credence, no other qualification, apart from educational ones, than being a human being. So I would say to them, be yourself, sweetheart, be yourself. If you feel something, then just be it.
Just own it and be yourself.
Yeah, be yourself.
And it's okay to be different.
It's scary, I get that.
It's so easy to just conform to the norm. What I can't, and this may sound somewhat naive, but with a lot of the debates that are going on now, particularly for the LGBTQ community and things that we don't want to bake cakes, or we don't want to do this, and they shouldn't be able to have the rights to do this, they shouldn't be able to. Why are you so concerned? Why is it bothering you at night when you lay your head down on that pillow? Why are you so upset by people who are doing nothing to you? They're just existing.
I'll tell you why.
You are upset with someone's right to exist.
I'll tell you why. Because
tell me why, because I don't get it.
Because it's conformity. Because at the moment there is a narrative that because of the sudden flourishing of diversity, from people of your diversity to people of my diversity to people of just anyone out there watching who is ginger or wears glasses or is in a wheelchair or is just anything that isn't on Love Island, you know.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Basically,
yeah, exactly.
I massively think each individual matters, and one should always be true to yourself. And do you know what? Just be respectful. Don't play into the narrative. Just because everybody online is so, and it's happening right now.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that in the future.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, going forward for the future, you know, yeah, what is your hope basically that we can? I think, what's the key here for you? Do you think that, you might agree with me, you may not, I think that educating people and sharing stories, I think there's so many myths and, you know, and assumptions and fake news and all this kind of nonsense that's being peddled out.
There's a narrative being put out there by rich, powerful people who want to control the future as they have the past. If you grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you heard the same thing in history class. We will never forget. Well, we've forgotten. Because it's happening again.
You've said that, yeah, you've said that quite a bit, I noticed online. And
I do say it online a lot.
I thought she is absolutely spot on.
You said
and sometimes you look at it and you
forgotten.
think, well, actually we've forgotten now because we seem to be losing who we are. We seem to
Allowing
lose
that kind
just basic empathy.
Yes.
The ability to understand, not necessarily agree. And that's one thing that I think sometimes people get a little bit, it gets a bit muddied waters. So just to wrap up now, obviously you've explained, you know, your journey basically to becoming CJ, and I'd just like you to kind of give me some final thoughts. So would you say that everything you have been through in terms of your transition journey, that it's been worth it? Do you have any regrets?
I have tons of regrets. Nobody ever wants to hurt anybody, and I haven't always been the kindest in the way that I've dealt with being me and becoming me. Living in person in today's society is very difficult. Everybody is under the microscope. Everybody.
That's true. Especially if you have a social media presence.
Yeah.
Which most of us, quite frankly, do. So we're essentially putting ourselves out there.
Generation.
We are.
They did make it happen, and it happened, and we're living in it. So I think I've been massively had to learn from being judged so widely and so critically. The whole world has an opinion.
Yeah.
And so I would just massively say that, do I have any regrets? Yes, I regret if I've ever hurt anyone. Do I regret the journey that the decision and the journey and the person that I am? Do I regret me? No, not at all.
Even if it means that, I mean, what is a happy ending anyway? What is the norm? But even if it means that you being you doesn't, that you don't get the happy ending that maybe you want. What's the happy ending for you?
Funnily enough, becoming me was chasing the happy ending.
Okay.
And then I suddenly realised, having had the operation, that the happy ending not guaranteed.
Yeah.
I massively realised that what being an adult is all about is just being happy with you, being comfortable,
and just doing the best
with
we can. I think all of us, in whatever way, shape or form, all of us, we're just trying to get by as happily that we can, do the best self that we can. I think when we're not being our best self, or as one of my idols, Trent Shelton, always says, if you're not living your best life, then you try and do your best to be better, and to try and just do what you can, and like you said, not intentionally hurt people along the way. I think that's key, really. We all hurt people, it happens, that's life, but it's not setting out to hurt people. It's, if you do hurt people, trying to do what you can to kind of step back and put it right.
I think if there was a little bit more acceptance
Yeah.
and a little bit more tolerance, then people might not hurt other people in the way that they do. I think,
and I think there'd be a lot more honesty in the world, because I think people generally, it doesn't matter what the topic
people
is.
hurt each other out of ignorance.
Yes, I agree. And people then, as a result, a backlash of that, sometimes people hold back and they're not their true self, or they put a facade because they feel they have to be. Mm-hmm. They don't want to let the guard down because they think, oh well, then I'm opening myself up.
You asked me earlier, my message to anybody, my message to you is please, 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 if you know who you are, be you. It doesn't matter what that is. Just be the you that is in your heart. Don't be what anybody tells you to be, even if it's your mum, your granddad, your wife. Just be yourself. Be you.
Thank you so much, CJ. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I hope that your story is going to inspire some other people. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to find out some more information about the trans report, which I quoted the statistics from, you can download a copy on Stonewall's website, so that's stonewall.org.uk. Let's be more vocal in standing up for our trans brothers and sisters, for their equal rights. Everyone has the right to exist without persecution. And as always, do follow me on social media, Twitter and Facebook at @Fergus-Ferrell, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Cheryl Fergus-Ferrell Presenter.